Good
Come on.
morning. Welcome to week 8 lecture. We have a special guest today, Carlos Encalada. He's a licensed therapist. He's been seeing clients for 6 years now, and he'll share with us some insights about trauma and um, compassion fatigue. Hi, Carlos. Welcome. How are you?
Hello. Good morning. Good. Good. I'm good.
So we'll start with our questions for today. First, what is the what is the definition of trauma, according to you and the healthcare field?
Yeah. So, in mental health, the DSM is like a commonly used tool um, to diagnose certain things. So, under the post-traumatic stress definition, uh, they actually highlight exposure to actual or being threatened with death or injury or sexual violence. That's the ones that they name particularly. Of course, um, people in the world experience all kinds of traumas that don't necessarily fall into those categories. So, as a practitioner, I mean, my definition is larger than um, what a particular DSM definition is, um, because trauma is a very subjective thing too. But really, um, in the way that I kind of conceptualize, it has a lot to do with what people's experience is. What are people struggling with? And with trauma in particular, there are definitely different aspects to that, like to a PTSD diagnosis, or even if it's not exactly the diagnosis, certain elements that fall in the range of some exposure or threat, um, or perception of threat, um, that experience that leads to sort of recurrent challenges, involuntary challenges like nightmares or things like that, um, and then perhaps some avoidance of certain environments or stimulus that really trigger that and make the anxiety more heightened. So trauma is like in the area of anxiety, um, an anxiety experience. So it's just heightened anxiety. That's very involuntary and uncontrolled, um, leading to maybe persistent avoidance, maybe leading to negative thoughts about things, or bleak outlooks on things. So also PTSD is something that's connected with things like depression as well, for those reasons. And then vigilance. Vigilance is like a big thing. Um, these are the sorts of things that fall in the definition of what trauma is and how it's sort of categorized, so that across the line people can sort of identify, oh, okay, trauma might be happening. I don't know if that's clear. Does that seem?
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I also wanted to ask if you had if we had to put it in a context of maybe daily stressors, how is trauma different, or is it the same?
Yeah, so I think like more and more, like thinking of things in a spectrum is like how like the practice of mental health happens. So like what I just said about anxiety and trauma. Um, so yeah, so like on the spectrum, like trauma is going past uh, anxiety. Like when someone might have like a fight or flight response to something happening, and in one way that's just like a very normal part of life. I kind of hesitate to use the word normal, but um, it's like a part of life. Like it's important that we have these anxieties so that we remain safe, for instance. Um, and when an experience is so intense that it sort of um, it almost messes with the circuitry of our internal system, such that our defense systems might be coming up for things that are daily, more like daily, like surprises, like maybe like a knock at the door. We might have like an overemphasized startle response, and so that's when we start getting into trauma. So then there's sort of like the daily anxieties of being in the world, um, and and that and there's a certain amount of that we get used to too. So a lot of this is socialized. So I mean, we will get to, like, as kind of we go further into the questions, it becomes clear that this is like not devoid of like a social piece, like this, you know, the DSM is a socially constructed tool, you know, but particular people put it together with particular perspectives, particular histories, and so that doesn't necessarily take into account the full spectrum of what is a traumatic experience in this world today for anybody in the world, because people's experiences are different. So which is why I said, you know, holding that the DSM is like a tool and kind of, but holding that with a grain of salt, that it's like that I'm also saying that it's not everything. That's clearly true, because it's definitely been a homophobic tool among others in the past. Yeah, and it's definitely evolved over time. So that's to say that, like, yeah, so what's somebody's everyday experience is important. So in a way, you know, I don't want to say that, like, oh, these experiences are normal, these experiences are not, because like everyone's like normal or flow of life is different. So really, it is about listening to the person in front of you and what they're struggling with.
Thank you. That makes sense. Maybe I'll start with question 2 now. During your practice, have you treated people from different communities? Was there a difference in the way that they experience or define trauma?
Yes, that's the question.
So it's question 2.
So tell me when to start. So yes, I worked in community mental health for 4 years, working with primarily Latinos. 90% of the agency was bilingual in Spanish, and for bicultural as well. And so most of my clients were Latinos, and they definitely have different experiences of trauma, even different like cultural like constructs for that, ways that they understand that, like calling anxiety sort of nerves, and that being sort of like a normalized experience. Also, trauma is being normalized for, you know, the sort of the stresses of a migration experience, or family traumas. So there's a way in which that how mental health and how trauma is held culturally for Latinos. I found through working with my clients that that it definitely is different, and these are things that I knew already. My family is Colombian, Ecuadorian. They were immigrants. I was born in this country though, so I have this cross-cultural experience for myself. So this is something that I've always paid attention to in mental health, in particular, my own mental health and mental health of my family. So in working with clients, I definitely am aware of how they express, like how expression is different. There's like less emphasis often on individual experiences and more on how things that are impactful affect the family, how people stay connected to each other. Chisme is a word that's used in Spanish. It actually, like, I guess, translates best to something like gossip, but chisme is this cultural thing that it's almost like how the family stays connected, even though it might not be directly between family members, like in the sort of cultural practice of connecting with each other through just talking, just having conversations with everybody in different settings, in the kitchen, in the living room, very like informal, but in these ways, like it seems like this is like how trauma can be held, or can be maybe like something that affects subjects, everybody is more, like, in my experience, it feels like it's more honestly held, because it's something like the things that impact one person impact the whole, like, network. How could it not? So I find working with Latinos, it's like it really is humbling too, because it really, I think, makes trauma something that's more, like, actually as complex as a trauma is. It's not so clear cut like we like to think more and more in medical terms that are just like black and white maybe, but trauma, I think in particular, sort of highlights how different communities hold, or how they, because of necessity. Um, and it doesn't mean that there aren't like bigger cultural things that are happening too. Like for instance, like it was always more culturally appropriate or what have you. Like I always had more women clients, although when there were men seeking mental health services, they would be more comfortable speaking with an identified man. So, but in terms of just the numbers of our mental health program, there were always so much more women interested in mental health services. And interestingly enough, and maybe not so surprising, but there were always more men um, involved with the substance use disorder program, which was a separate program, which more and more now, like, substance use and mental health are being treated together, because they obviously, like, impact each other. So, but yeah, so maybe I'll kind of pause there and we can go to the next, because I feel like I kind of covered that fully here.
Yeah, thank you so much. And it actually we've addressed that in our reading quite a bit for this week about links between substance abuse and trauma. So thank you for addressing that. And our next question is kind of what you were ending with anyway, which is, would you say there is a distinction between community level and individual trauma? And I actually might pause the recording here just to start the next one. So I'll pause it 1 second.